um program for advancement in health and education. And so these are some other countries have different social protection guarantees that looks at persons with disabilities, yes, access, social inclusion issues in terms of how we broadcast. Like, no, we have a watch, a hurricane watch. How does the deaf community get access to this information? The blind community. Those are issues that the comprehensive disaster risk management policy has to take into consideration, because there are social inclusion issues that each policy will know. Thank you. Language barriers, yes, because if we have Chinese, we have Spanish speakers, are different nations in our domicile that doesn't necessarily speak English, they would be left behind. And one of the issues is undergirding this Agenda 2030 is leaving no one behind. So policies have to now look at gender, youth, social inclusion, elderly, and just about the whole. We have to plan along intersectional lines. So not just planning in a vacuum, but using a multi-prong approach and getting people who do not you can't be sitting in an office and writing a policy for persons from a different community, an indigenous community. You have to go to them, and somebody from that community has to be on your governance team. And so the drafting and the review would need to have stakeholders, and not just consultations, but it needs to be addressed from that angle, that somebody needs to have a deep dive into what your policy is, even from the conceptual stage. And so seek, as you said, you have to have, as you said, wide scale sectoral consultations, and then public dissertation of what it is, so everybody knows and sees themselves in your policy. Thank you. And then when we go to different levels of government for approval, we need to ensure that they have their different persons, so they may send back the policy for further review. Thank you so much for your active participation. So, in a nutshell, this is what the trajectory of the policy looks like in terms of the conceptual phase, where we did our needs assessment, or a rapid rural assessment, or a document review, and we do our site visits to the issues. We get our different experts to look at the issues. What is the comprehensive issue? What is the undergirding issue why we need to develop a policy? What are the issues? Are we going to monitor? Are we going to implement? So you flesh out that paper and you send it off for review. Then we look at the policy preparation and analysis. Sometimes you normally get a consultant here who has the requisite experience drafting policies. It normally goes to different sectors to get feedback. If you're doing anything in architecture, you probably need somebody in social inclusion on your team. You need an M&E analysis. You need somebody that has the requisite infrastructural engineering, civil engineering background. So you need all this. If it's road, you need that kind of background to tell you the type of material, what is done elsewhere. Then you go to your public consultation phase and you get it to a green paper by the time it goes to cabinet. When it gets there, you go back through another round of consultations, or they might send it to the Bureau of Gender and Social Affairs, whichever it is in your country, and look at it to say, does it address issues of the vulnerable, the elderly? We send it to like an NGO that does elderly. Does it have key population issues? If it's a health policy that target HIV, who are the persons who would use it? What are the discrimination that they face at health centers? And then when you have like a no objection, from a certain ministry, a certain NGO, it's good to get no objection letters, especially if it was sent back to say this key population didn't agree with the policy. It's good when you are sending it back to cabinet or whoever is approving it, you have that no objection that the policy now addresses these issues. And it's normally a simple letter from the permanent secretary or the head of that organization or that umbrella organization within the region. When it gets to white paper and it's presented before the prime minister and his cabinet, they approve it, then you now have to go to the parliamentary secretariat for it to be tabled. And so it has to come on the ministry paper, it has to be read that it is tabled. So it got through a series of iteration before it now gets on the policy register. And trust me, policies take about 5 to 6 years. If it's something that is critical, it may take less time. So one next 2 to 3 years, if you know what you're doing. But it really takes a while. It takes a while. It takes a while. See, we had the comprehensive disaster policy and it was tabled as green paper in 2022. We haven't heard anything about it. It may probably take 3 years. That's the max I'm going to say that it can get done. But it takes a while because persons need to ensure that it's fully comprehensive and it passes the different stage. So a policy normally takes a while to get done. It might be a stretch 5 to 6 years, it depends, but I don't think you can get a policy out within less than 2 years. Right, and the issue, and that's why it has to be, that's why it's iterative, Kafri, because by the time it gets there, it has to be, it has different lens and it might balloon in something different. And the process has to be iterative, that has the situation gets fluid, you have the necessary mechanisms to address it. So yeah, Diana K said minimum 2 to 3 years, yeah. So that it takes process because you have to do your sectorial consultations. That's after you have written it in-house, and then you would have shared it with different ministries and the different NGOs. And then I think yes, you have issues. I think we have measures to address the issues in the meantime. But for it to be very comprehensive and to get the sign off that it needs and to be passed as a ministry paper, it needs a minimum of 2 years because think about it. You planning island-wide consultations, getting back to cabinet. Remember, there's a lot of things tabled on cabinet. So another 3 months, you do a 3 months consultations, you review it for a month, get it back to cabinet, it's tabled, they send it back, you take another 3 months. And so it depending on if the ministry that had the problem or the NGO, their response rate that they say, yes, you have fully addressed it, then it goes faster. And so, in terms of our needs assessment, and that's why it's very important that we do a thorough needs assessment at the onset, it needs to consider the problem, the analysis of the stakeholders. You need to know your stakeholders. You identify the social, economic, environmental factors, proper data analysis, develop your plans and your strategies. A policy might have different thematic areas to address. So if you go online and you look at the just 2022 population policies, population does migration, you look at the population parameters of mortality, fertility, migration. Within each of those parameters, migration has about 12, 20 different areas, from domestic, regional, global. Fertility, different aspect of fertility, different neonatals that die in the hospitals, the prenatal care, aftercare, mortality, the different civil registration and vital statistics. So each policy have different domains, and so you have to address them. You have to address aging, elderly. These are off the top of my head, but when you deep dive into the policy, you'll see how many years it takes, and that's why it takes so long to fully get a comprehensive policy. And then you need real-time data. And data is a challenge. If you can tell me that data is not a challenge in your country, getting data, getting reliable data is expensive to collect data, real-time data to get the infrastructure up in terms of collection of digital data, getting to the far remote areas to ensure that everybody is in. And you have to ensure you have capacity to manage it. So these are why it takes so long. A comprehensive policy, look at it. If it's traffic, if it's health, if it's poverty, it has different dimensions. So these are some of the tools that you're seeing on my left side that you use to get the concept paper and get it right. Importance of policy implementation, accountability. Right. So somebody's saying the data is outdated, 2019. Yes. We see the challenges with the existing census is 2011, and there are challenges now to get the persons to collect data. I have not been counted. I don't know if you have been counted as yet. And so just getting the population parameters is very critical. So you see the challenges from last year to just count the population. We were at 2.7. That's the projections, 2.7 million Jamaicans. And so these are some of the challenges when you look at policy development. Risk mitigation, risk assessment, risk register, persons with the necessary capacity to collect the data to manage the risk of whatever policy that we're being implementing. When we look at issues around efficiency, we're talking about time and we're talking about cost. Productivity, how does that translate in us being more productive? And so these are some considerations when you move from developing the policy now to having that governance mechanism to manage it, to implement it, and get it into a work plan and budget. And so, what are some of the challenges that we see being faced in our existing multiplicity of policies? Stakeholders' resistance to change. We saw that with the traffic as a policy, taxation policies. We see resistance to change because people don't like changing their modus operandi, how they do business, but it needs stakeholder. Yeah, it needs stakeholder buy-in. It needs people at the table to see. We see needs the national identification system that would bring everything under one umbrella. So somebody asked me about policy. Look at needs. Needs has started from 2017, 2018 or beyond. Where are we with needs? And so now it's 2023. So I'm really not lying. And so it's the national identification system. We have been trying to implement that from about 5 years now and put that into policy and put it into implementation. We have been making progress, but if you're living in Jamaica, you see that has been slow in trying to get a one identifier for us. And that would probably have helped the census somewhat because we could have probably gone digitally. Lack of awareness ties into the resistance to change. Yes, ignorance. And this prevents implementation because if they're not enforced, it can create implementation inertia that we're used to, reduce compliance, and undermine the issue that we're trying to solve. And then the biggie, if we don't have the physical land space, in terms of landscape, sorry, we have to get these policies funded. How these policies are funded translates into budgets, translates into capital B or recurrent budget if you work in government of Jamaica. And so everything has to be accounted for. And so we have to ensure that whatever we are planning fits into the government priorities for the year. And so that's how it gets funded. And yes, there's especially around the environment, we see the deep sea mining and those issues around environmental change with the NGOs. These are some of the issues that we toggle with on a day-to-day basis, I think regionally, locally, and globally. And the biggie for me, which is my pet peeve, my area, monitoring and evaluation. And so for policies to be effective, they have to be monitored. What do we mean by monitored? They have to be tracked in terms of monitoring. Data has to be available. We have to know where we were in terms of the problem, the baseline. If we get funding from international donor partners, they want to know that the indicators are being have measurable indicators or signposts to say, was the poverty policy, how many programs were implemented, how many children were fed on the PAD program, how many children are enrolled in school, do we have primary education full access, what's the quality of the education tied into the SDGs. And so these are some of the policies that have in strong, robust implementation mechanisms in Jamaica that do have a governance framework, an M&E framework, and they actually hire independent consultants to actually see if the policy is working, see if the program is working, to report back to different donor partners, whether it's the European Union, the Inter-American Development Bank, the World Bank, to see if whatever funds are allotted, they are being implemented. And the key word is change. Are we seeing results? Are we having back for our buck? Accountability. So this is the National Forest Management and Conservation Plan. It ties into RED Plus globally, the Green Climate Fund, the Global Environmental Facility, the what's the national it's the every country has a national adaptation plan. Climate, you see COP 28, the climate program that is going to be held in Dubai now. It's the 28th sitting. So they look at globally how countries are meeting their national determined contributions towards 1.5 to stay alive. That's temperature, that's global warming. We see that countries, so the National Conservation and Forestry Management Plan, you know that global emissions, that forestry is one of the best ways to lower emissions. And so you have the forestry department planting 3,000 trees in 3 years. You have different mechanisms in schools, behavior change. You have their 5 program, and you see the inward facing thematic area of M&E. So how they are able to look at outcome 1 to 4 is by building the capacity inward to manage, to strap this towards the funding that they get and how they're contributing to the global goals. And not just that, in terms of providing support for 1.5 to stay alive. The very thing that we are facing, if you live in Jamaica now, you're hearing raindrops on your roof, and you might can't go to work tomorrow because you don't know if you're going to drop in a pothole. If you're driving, you have to be driving very slow, because when the water is on the road, you might not know if you'll be able to come home. And one of the worst thing is that if you have a vehicular problem in the middle of the rain, because other motorists are not really going to come out and help you, and because of the poor drainage system. So are we seeing how policy is critical to our lived experience? Policy is very important because climate change is right now when you look at the issues in terms of forest governance and forest utility, it's the very thing that is affecting us now in Jamaica, because we have extreme events that now it's November and we're having a tropical depression. When you look how it impact the farmers, and already we were hearing that we would be having price hikes in food, in vegetables come December. So are you seeing how that affect our bread and butter? Climate change is affecting us. It's not so far-fetched from your reality as you think. Right. Thank you, Justin. And so I spoke about the National Population and Sustainable Development Policy. You have a host of different entities that feeds into this one policy, that you cannot send this policy to cabinet without consulting Jamaica Family Planning, Fertility, the UNFPA that deals with all the issues around population and funding in the region. You look at Ministry of Culture, Entertainment and Sport, Transport and Mining. So it's all related. And so one of the other things is our social protection strategy. It also has a monitoring and a governance framework to ensure that this strategy is being monitored. It has like what is the key basket of items, so persons don't necessarily what are needed for a family of five to stay above the global as well as the national poverty line. And we have a multidimensional poverty index that is tied to what the World Bank and IDB measures, tied to the SDGs that monitors our poverty rates yearly. And so results-based management that I am in keeps us accountable. And so within any program or policy is that we have a problem and we want to achieve the desired results. We are working towards achieving them. And so results-based management is an approach, and I spoke to you about why the SDG came in, is to ensure that all countries are working towards common results. It creates a link between what are the intended results, the outputs, and the day-to-day activities and budget to achieve the results that we want. So this is meal, monitoring, evaluation, learning, and accountability in a nutshell, ensuring that policy making is informed by what works, what is essential to achieve long-term objectives. So to have an M&E needs another session by itself, but the critical nature of monitoring and evaluation is to hold us accountable. We say we're going to do X by X time. Did we achieve it? Are we doing the right things? Is there evidence of contribution and accountability? And so in order for us to know if we said we were going to address drainage, it needs an M&E framework to see that yes, you did the necessary, you hired the consultant, he did a drainage map, it was approved, you did the necessary infrastructure, and we can ask this the National Works Agency to go measure the rainfall, the amount of rainfall, to see if it has gone down, if there's flooding in the area, because we can use that as an indicator to say, yes, you would have achieved your results. So somebody mentioned SMART, a clear, realistic, measurable statement of action towards a goal. Are our objectives specific? Are our policies specific? Do they address what they said they're going to address? And we can use SMART, whether it's our indicators or our objectives. Can I track what I'm saying I'm going to measure with the policy? Is the policy time bound and the actions time bound? Are they strategically relevant to what is going on globally or locally to address the people at the grassroots needs? And as we said, are they time bound? So whatever we are doing, we have to make sure that it's our policies, our programs, our projects, our indicators that we use are smart, actionable, and attainable. That's what a policy is, an action. And so Monitoring is done internally in the organization that is implementing the policy. It's normally continuous, systematic. So if we have a session, we have a register. Taj can take the register of who were here. We have if it was a face-to-face, you have a physical register that we scan for the donors. We can know, we can take age, we can take the sex disaggregated breakdown, and we could have a questionnaire that looks at, did you were you exposed to policy development? What did this session do for you? So we're looking at knowledge building, we're assessing if there was knowledge change, and so over time, that's what monitoring does. Are we doing the right things? When we move over to evaluation, that's more periodic, that is looking at what we call the theory of change, the why and the how. Yes, we fix the drainage. How is that impacting productivity? How is that impacting safe routes to school, safe route to work? How is that impacting the aesthetics of the community? So we're looking at the change in behavior and change in the institutional, the different policies that come as a result of that change. And this is normally done by an independent consultant to ensure that it's accountable, to ensure that there is no partiality of the organization. Because we want to tick our boxes, say that our policy is good. Are you understanding? And so there is the Development Assistance Committee, OECD criteria that is mostly used by all organizations that looks at, all right, you have said you have started a program X to eradicate or to reduce poverty in this area. How were the resources utilized? In terms of currents, was it aligned to the no hunger SDG, the overarching Vision 2020 or Vision 2030, whatever policy, whatever programs or strategies in the country? Is it relevant to the people in the area? Have you heard a story that they made some bathrooms downtown? When they made the bathrooms, because the person saw the females were having showers outside, but when they made the shower stalls, there was another challenge. The women were being raped. They didn't consult with the ladies as to why they were bathing outside. And then they just think that, oh, they don't have proper infrastructure. When they did that, persons were being raped. The issue was that persons were bathing outside because there was a sense of protection. And so when we look at policies, some of us make restrooms for community persons that are, we go in and we see unsanitary things. There's no sanitary facilities, and we build the bathrooms and persons going there to live. Why are they living in it? Because they didn't have proper housing. So we have to do our transit walks. We have to do our due diligence. We have to do our needs assessment, bring in the experts, and some people will not talk. And so we have to go thoroughly through the community. That's why we have social workers, social assessment persons on our teams to really eke out the information of what is the main issue before we put in an intervention and it's not relevant. You see why we have these critical criteria? And so it's important to do our needs assessment. So when we come in now as independent evaluators, that all your boxes can be ticked. Was it effective? Did I achieve my objective? I built the stall, but was it supposed to, did it achieve the objective of ensuring that ladies have proper facilities to shower? No, the ladies didn't need, it wasn't about it was crime and violence in the area. And so, yes, we need to do, whether it's a social appraisal, if it might not necessarily be a needs assessment, it might be a rapid integrated assessment, but whatever it is that addresses the need of the problem or the root cause of the problem, you need to do your research first before you can come up with. Don't sit in your glass offices and make policies for persons who you are not being affected by the issue. And impact the change. Did we make a difference? When we speak to the elderly, when we speak to the persons with disabilities, did we make a difference in terms of the ramp? Were they specific to the specifications? Did we get the right specifications that addresses in terms of how the ramp are slanted? Did quality and due diligence? These are things that we ask. And so this is an example of the United Nations Environmental Program full evaluation. Any consultant they're hiring, they must look at the OECD criteria, but they also must look at what are the issues affecting performance. So they go beyond the DAC criteria, and they also look at environment and social safeguards. Did we make persons worse off? Yes, Sherissa, you have your hand up? Go ahead, Sherissa. Okay, I guess that was a mistake. So when we look at evaluation, we go beyond, are we doing the right things, to ask, did we do things right? So what? So when we're looking at monitoring, we look at the what and the when we did things, the what and the when. When we look at evaluation, we're looking at the why and the how. Why were things, why was there a difference? How was the difference made? And so these are the lens that the evaluator comes in to ensure that the change can be attributed to our policy, to our interventions. And these are just the guidelines of when and how monitoring and evaluation are used differently, the different focus, the different lens that it's take, and what tools are used to do evaluation. And so some of the key tools to monitor and implement your policy, you need an implementation plan. After you have done this beautiful document, you need a work plan. You need a budget. So to ensure that it's aligned with your country's budget, the priorities, you need a theory of change. So you need an M&E expert to see if we put these in, if this is the problem, if we put this in, then this will change and this will lead to reduced poverty, reduce waiting times at health centers, reduce productivity, look at climate variability in this area, reduce flooding in Old Harbor. We can put a drainage system in so that it's less flooding and it increases productivity. In M&E, you need a performance measurement framework to continue tracking your indicators and your targets to see if they're being achieved and if you need to change. And you need risk. You need to manage your risk to see what are the environment, social, economic risks, because right now MOF needs to manage some risks with the NAA, the roads people, ODPEM, the flooding, and some schools, MOEY, have to be closed tomorrow because these schools will be used as sheltered. Are we seeing how these issues are close to us? And so this is a tool that we use in M&E, as I said before, to look, it explain what the plan intervention will do, from the inputs, the money, the budget resources, the human resources, the activities. I kept a workshop, behavioral change, don't throw the garbage in the gully. It will cause flooding over and over. Tag it, bag it. We need those things. The outputs, we need to put bins in the community. So we're telling them, don't show it. We need to separate your garbage. So we need to put the plastics. We need to put things that cauterize the garbage from going into the sea. the outcomes over 5 to 10 years that we're seeing less littering in the communities, less conservation, fish sanctuaries start being replenished. We see nature-based solutions. We're seeing backyard gardenings. Are we seeing the different changes? And so these will all culminate or cohere together to ensure that we have the outcomes of reduced emissions, reduced dumping, better environmental conservation practices. We start at the school level, the community, and the impact. A healthier goal for a healthier natural environment. And we see that we are aiming for 21 years to achieve that impact of Jamaica as a healthy natural society. That's goal 4 of Vision 2030. Are you seeing and so we need a lot of models, a lot of strategies, a lot of policies to achieve this, and it must all cohere together. This is an example of basic logic models that you have to theorize to get to the theory of change that you want, and the causal linkages. If I do this, if I have this assumption, I hold this reset bay, then this will occur. And this is an example of a performance measurement framework that is normally the M&E specialist tool that she or he uses to track your indicator, your targets. And we normally do, as part of our needs assessment, a SWOT. And these are some of the things that we ask in a SWOT. The strengths and the weaknesses are internal to the organization, the opportunities and the threats, the outside, the COVID-19, the opportunities, the global funding. We talk about intersectional lens, gender, indigenous, housing, leaving no one behind, and the risk matrix. Very key tools that you need. And so my final slide, policy development is iterative, but it needs to be done in a structured framework for there to be accountability. I talk about the research, I talk about the stakeholder inclusion. For it to be effective and consistent, it needs to have certain things: accountability, risk mitigation. There will be challenges, change, resistance to change. So you need a lot of social marketing, a lot of awareness, inputs of persons, ownership, buy-in, so they're not so resistant, so they're more compliant. And then as an M&E practitioner, you need to have a robust M&E framework tied to your implementation plan that is budgeted for. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you so much for being a part of this session and being very participatory. Over to you, Tajay. Are there any questions?
Any questions? I saw some comments coming in. Hands are being raised. Excellent sessions. You are most engaging. Thank you. Good evening. Would this informative be shared? Yes, it will be shared. Excellent presentation. Enjoyed the session. Thank you so much. Excellent session. All right, I'm good. Those are some of the comments in the chat. It's supposed to be thoroughly enjoyed the presentation, learned a lot. Thank you for having this session, very informative. This was a very informative session. I enjoyed it thoroughly. Really enjoyed this presentation. Amazing information, excellent session. Thank you from Trinidad and Tobago. Was a great presentation, was informative and educational, very important. Very informative session indeed. Thank you for this opportunity. Wonderful presentation. Very engaging. How does Jamaica approach foreign policy, particularly in relation to its Caribbean neighbors and the global community? That is a question. Mrs. Brian Bennett in the chat. How does Jamaica approach foreign policy, particularly in relation to its Caribbean neighbors and the global community.
I am trying to let me see something to JYM.
Mrs. Brian Bennett,
Yes, yeah. In terms
I
of
just
foreign
read that.
policy, are you hearing me? Are you hearing me?
Yeah, I'm hearing you now.
Okay, so in terms of foreign policy, it is normally done through our Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade. And you know that we have like a diaspora policy and we have different protocols. And so in terms of how we approach, it's guided by those protocols. And so the foreign ministry or the foreign minister normally is guided by the protocols or whatever bilateral agreement that is across, whether it's a bilateral with a country or a multilateral agreement with different stakeholders. So in terms of my limited knowledge, I can only be guided by that our foreign policies are guided by whatever bilateral or multilateral agreement that would have signed on to.
Thank you. I hope that should have answered the question for Amoy Johnson. All right, I saw Omar Miller and Reese in the chat. Please unmute your mic and go ahead and ask your question.
All right, good afternoon, everyone, or good evening. I must say this presentation, it was very informative, very educational, and I am also inspired. But I must say, Mrs. Bennett Bryan, that as I work and as you have mentioned, in regards to the work that I do, I work with children as a guidance counselor. And one of the things that I've recognized is that based on the level of performance that I can do, it is based on policy or the lack thereof. With that said, I'm now in the process of thinking about doing my master's, and I think I have found an area that I want to go into because when it comes to youth mental health, I'm not sure if you can guide me, but are you aware of any policy that currently exists that deals with child and adolescent mental health in Jamaica? Because that's where I'm looking. I'm looking for policies that is focusing on mental health. Where are the gaps? Because I don't want to just jump into anything without doing my thorough research. But looking so far, I cannot seem to find any documentation that addresses child and adolescent mental health. So, based on your wealth of knowledge, do you have any suggestion or any idea of such policy existing?
So we had I think we had stakeholder consultations when we were doing I don't remember which policy at the Planning Institute of Jamaica, but I know that we had discussions with Dr. There's a mental health unit within the Ministry of Health. And so they would have had jurisdiction or oversight over, there was supposed to be a mental health policy. I don't know where it's at now, but I know that there is, however, a mental health unit within the Ministry of Health. But I can't speak to where the mental health policy is. In relation to children and mental health, I know that I am not sure if UNICEF had done something on children and mental health, but it's something that you could start researching. But I know that there's a mental, Dr. Irons Morgan was in charge of that. I think she's now retired, but we'd have had to have consultations with her. And I know that some of the responsibility would fall under the CPFSA in terms of children and Office of the Children's Advocate. So these are some of the stakeholders that you might have to call and see what are the policies or what are the regulations governing that. And
All right.
then there's no rule of not looking outside as well within the region and globally as to what are some of the good practice. But you can start local. But I know there's a mental health unit within the Ministry of Health and Wellness.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much for the response.
You're welcome.
Thank you for that
Check the chat
response,
as
Mrs.
well.
Bennett.
Anitra is saying you also have a child safety and UNICEF safeguarding.
Thank you, Mrs. Bennett Bryan. There's another question. There's another unraised Crystal Chase. Go ahead.
Good night, everyone. Thank you so much, Youth Association, for being so inclusive. I'm from Trinidad, and thank you for including all of us. This is a topic that we really benefited from. Mrs. Bennett Bryan, have you found in your 15 years of experience that in your policy making, we've had challenges with the law? So you give us a time frame. Would law legal changes to existing law, would that have any type of impact on the time frame?
So what you'd see is that sometimes, and I'll give you an example, there was in 2017 we were doing the national international migration, and then there was the issue of our rating on the trafficking in persons and in relation to Jamaica. So we had to have a trafficking in persons act. And then there were an amendment to the act. So you're quite right. So there had to be regulations that govern the law that came into place as different issues were addressed around the different on the trafficking in persons. There were different specific definitions, and even in terms of how it is addressed in the court, because children were involved, and so there had to be different regulations that address the different dimensions of trafficking in person, and in keeping with the U.S. Department of State based on how they had flagged us. So yes, there would have to be parallel changes in the legislative agenda and the regulations for it to have teeth and for the policy to be implemented and enforced. And I could use the example of the Trafficking in Person Act.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank
You're welcome.
you for the responses and the questions. Are there any more questions or need to be raised? Let me just slip back into the chat where I'm seeing some comments. Thank you for your time. Excellent informative presentation. Informative presentation with knowledge of not just Jamaica. Excellent. This has truly been very educational. I thoroughly
Sajay,
enjoyed the
I think there
presentation.
is a question that was asking about children and disaster. Could you repeat that question? Oh, it was in terms of students, health and mental well-being. Justine, was that answered? We currently in a disaster era, for example, hurricane, earthquake. What measures are put in place to train students and also protect themselves? So as I said, in Jamaica, there is the comprehensive disaster risk management policy. So that would have had to have consultations with the Ministry of Education and Youth, and then you'd have to have consultations with ODPEM in terms of the drills, in terms of different aspects of training, because earthquake drill is different from what you teach them about flooding or any other specific disaster, and also what are the causes and the consequences. So there would have to be different entities and different so the earthquake unit of probably ODPEM or the seismic unit out of YEA would have to engage the schools through MOEY. ODPEM that we have in Jamaica would have to also approach the schools in terms of disaster risk reduction and management. And so there are different trainings that are offered to not just schools as well, but also businesses in terms of the in terms of the behavior change. So those are things that are ongoing. I do not work for any of them, but I know that because I would have had discussions or been at presentations with ADPEM, that these are some things that goes on. And ADPEM is very much also would have been a part of our steering committee in migration.
Thank you, thank
But
you
I
for
cannot speak to the M&E of it. I'm just aware, and I can't speak to the frequency either.
thank you for those responses. I believe there's another question in the chat. How does the government address issues like unemployment and poverty through its economic policies?
So there is in terms of poverty, as I said, there is a poverty reduction unit in the Planning Institute of Jamaica. It's also tied, you would have been aware that there's Ministry of Labor and Social Security that offers different social protection programs, a raft of them if you go on their website. So depending on the criteria, if it's children, elderly, there's part. If it's elderly, again, there's homeless shelters that both NGO as well as the Ministry of Local Government operates. In terms of the poverty policy and the poverty unit, they are the ones they do not implement, but they coordinate these programs to see what is being done, and they report now into Vision 2030. But this is not exhaustive. Please don't quote me. This is some of the things that GOJ is doing. Employment, you have statin. There was the labor reform unit in the PIOJ a couple of years ago. I don't know if it's still there. They had different parameters of employment. There's a labor seminar that is done out with IDB and the Planning Institute of Jamaica. Labor again is under the Ministry of Labor and Social Security. That's the implementing arm, because the PIOJ is a policy directorate of the government of Jamaica.
Indeed, indeed. A few more comments. I am new to this, so I am just learning overall. Very educational session. Will the meeting be recorded, emailed to us? Sure, it can be emailed to you. You sure can get a link to rewatch it. Also, it's also on YouTube. So you can always go on YouTube and type in Youth Education Association Youth Development Workshop, and you'll find this link, plus other sessions that we have done in the past on YouTube. Schools would have a disaster management plan and committee. Thank you for your time. Very informative and some things to implement. All right. Other comments. Does it go for a tertiary institution also? This was a question. I guess you're responding to something. Another question they were asking if it go for tertiary institution. Also, I'm not sure when you were that question being asked. An eye-opener on policies and the different entities on which it has to go through before being implemented. At least this is what occurred in the TIC Turks and Caicos Island. Just a moment there. Sorry about that. I learned a lot. Really appreciate it. Really appreciate it. This broadened my horizon. Will definitely subscribe. Last comment. In a rapid changing world, what skills and qualities do you think are most crucial for young people to develop for future success? And how can we ensure they have access to the necessary resources and education to acquire these skills? I guess it's a question. I will repeat, in a rapidly changing world, what skills and qualities do you think are most crucial for young people to develop for future success? And how can we ensure they have access to the necessary resources and education to acquire these skills?
Wow, this is a very challenging one, Shanique, but I'll say be adaptable and it would depend on soft skills. So in terms of education, the government has a responsibility to provide education up to what Taje, the secondary level. For most countries, it's free. And so once you get to that level, then there are other programs that it would be on the youth to be social media savvy, not just for personal thing, but for your educational development. So we have rights and we have responsibility. So in our country, in Jamaica, there's the Archos technical vocational training that provides up to level 3 free technical vocational training, and it's in globally competitive areas that provides global interface and regional interface. We have the CARICOM certificate that allows you access to different regions to work. And then there are opportunities globally, scholarships online. You have Kaya website, you have different Allison websites, you have LinkedIn platform that offers free knowledge, free information. So, but one of the key skills is being adaptable, flexible, and learnable, because what we know now is quickly changing with AI. So we have to continue being learning. So you have to be flexible, adaptable, and always researching. That's my, and somebody put some other course, Udemy, a lot of certificates that you can do for free. The UN, I think University Unitar, free courses that are globally recognized and gives you a cutting edge.
Indeed, indeed. So I want to just now test the waters. I want to see how far we are. Can persons just put either their country flag or type out the country that they're currently at in the chat? I want to see how far we are in this workshop. Go ahead and either type your country or put the flag into the chat. Let us see. Let us see where we are coming from. All right, I'm seeing Jamaica thus far. Ghana in the building. Ghana is here. St. Lucia. Barbados in the building. Trinidad and Tobago. The Bahamas. Jamaica. Continue, keep them going, keep them going. It's 80 of us here. Keep them going. Barbados. Trinidad and Tobago. That's so awesome. We're all over the Caribbean. I know TCI was here earlier. I'm not sure that if they're still here. Keep them going, keep them going. I want to see I want to see somebody from TCI. That's so great. I am so happy to see that we have persons all across the Caribbean here with us tonight. I know for those Caribbean islands, it may be after 9 now. They're in that Caribbean country and they're still here with us. Continue to learn and to garner the additional knowledge in policy development, policy implementation, and monitoring. Somebody says CARICOM repping. Yes, the email. Yes, I can say that. I just say that, Chantal, Margaret, that it's now after 9 in those Caribbean islands. Here in Jamaica, it's after 8. Yes, the recording will be emailed to us. Please also, there's a survey at the end of this. The YouTube page is Youth Education Association. You can go on there and always watch back this recording. It will always be there. So we have now come to the end of this youth development workshop just for tonight. There's another one in November. That one is November 29th. It's accountants workshop. So we did policy just now, but there's one for accountants coming up on November 29th. That's Wednesday, November 29th, accountants workshop. Please come out for that one. The flyer will be sharing by over the weekend for that one. Somebody asked, oh, can we apply to YEA? I will be sending can a team member of mine, Miss All Cheyenne, please just send the recruitment link into the chat for that person to apply. Recruitment is also going on to join Youth Education Association. Feel free. The link will be shared as soon as possible into the group for persons to join Youth Education Association. We all volunteer our time to do all of this activity geared towards youth, young adults, and students. So I just want, there is a link into the group. Sorry, there's a link into the chat currently. I have been asking these questions from morning till now. Is membership limited to Jamaica? I still don't have an answer yet, but I don't think it will. Limited to Jamaica only, but we need to see how best we can work with that. I would still like to know which specific online certificate courses would be suggested to do and learn more. If that can be answered via email, that would be nice. Sure, we can answer that via email once we get further responses. So thanks again, everyone, for coming out. We really do appreciate you coming out to our youth development workshop under the theme policy development, implementation, and monitoring. It was a pleasure having you, Mrs.
Good night, Mr.
Alicia.
Wallen. Before you go, I know we're doing a parent for life workshop. Could you speak more on that, please?
Not a problem. We also in November, notwithstanding, we have another workshop the 29th of November. Also in November, we have a parenting workshop called Train the Parents for Life workshop. That workshop is we're trying to expose parents in Kingston in different areas such as restorative justice, good parenting, and financial literacy. So parents are being exposed to those areas. It's the restorative justice is conducted by the Ministry of Justice here in Jamaica. The good parenting will be conducted by the National Parenting Support Commission in Jamaica, and the financial literacy session will be done by a financial institution here in Jamaica. Those are physical things that we're also having here in the month of November. As you know, November is Youth Month and also Parents Month. So we try to cater towards our parents and youths in the month of November. Would there be...
How long will the workshop run, and where can we find this workshop, Mr. Wallen?
This workshop is held at St. Andrew Technical High School in Kingston off Spanish Town Road. Persons in other Caribbean island will not maybe understand what we're saying. But yeah, for those who in Jamaica, this is held at St. Andrew Technical High School, also known as STATS. It is gonna be run from the 11th of November through to December 2nd. So it's 4 weeks of workshop. Each week will be a different topic that we expose parents to. We also have the Ministry of Labor and Social Security on board for persons who want to talk about PATH program to get their students on the PATH program in these communities. Also, we want to have NIS on board as well for persons who are through NIS and want to know the benefits of NIS and how to get those benefits The workshop will be done
My
for
final
4.
question, Mr. Wallen, good night. My final question, sir, is how can I contribute if I am not physically present, whether in
If
cash or kind?
you can also participate in this workshop by donating to us. We have our bank accounts in Youth Education Association. You can reach out to us and we share that banking information for you to send your monetary contribution. In kind contribution, you can just message us, email us with what you have with your in-kind. Now we set up a meeting time, date and time to collect those in-kind contribution as well. I wonder if somebody can just type it in the chat, a team member from my team, just quickly type in the chat the banking details for persons who want to donate to us, the Youth Education Association. Also, you can always message us. Our numbers are on the flyer, emails are on the flyer for this workshop. You can just have a check, message us on that WhatsApp number or email us using the email address for us and tell us how you want to donate, and we'll sure to get that connected. Good evening. One last question. Good evening. Concerning the application for membership in Youth Education Association, I am currently 15 years old, will be completing my CSEC exam next year. Can I still apply considering that I may not be able to attend in person frequently? That's fine. If you're not able to attend activities frequently, we do understand and we'd like you to complete your school in fine style. So we'll also try to assist you as best as possible in that. The survey is at the end when I close the meeting, Shamilia. So that's it again. Thank you again for coming out, everyone. We really appreciate it. That's our bank account details in the chat just now shared by Shamara. All you can send your monetary contribution to that bank account in the name of Youth Education Association. If you have any kind donation in kind, you can always send us an email, send us a WhatsApp message on the number on the flyer, and we will respond for pickup date and time. All right. Thank you again, everyone, for coming out. It's been a pleasure having you and hosting this youth development workshop on policy implementation, policy development, implementation, and monitoring. Thank you again, Alicia Bennett Bryan, for having us and for conducting and facilitating this workshop with youths right across Jamaica. We really appreciate it. I hope this will not be the first and will
And
not
the
be the
world.
last, but let us see about that.
Right across Jamaica and the Caribbean.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Thanks again, everyone, for coming out. Have a wonderful evening. Good night.